Welcome back to my shop. We're going to build this queen size platform bed. This was a fun build. It was a quick build and it was pretty challenging. Stick around with me and we'll get into it. So while I begin breaking down some plywood, we're going to cut this into some strips. This was a design that I had created 2 or 3 years ago, and my son decided that he needed a bed. When I designed this bed, we designed it as a king size, but he's in need of a queen size. So I made a few adjustments, and I'm more than happy to get this opportunity to build this design. And as you can see, I've taken those plywood strips and I'm running a groove down the edge, and I flip that board around, run it through twice so that I make sure that groove is perfectly centered down the edge of that board. And then I will go ahead and make some tongues on these pieces here. And we're just going to go ahead and make some web frames for the carcass of the base of our bed. And our base will actually be made out of 3 main pieces. And that way we'll be able to disassemble this bed and move it around as needed. If you've watched some of my other videos, you've seen me make these web frames before. I like using this method. It helps reduce weight in the overall project, but it also is a very strong way to build. And so I'm taking these frames here and I'm going to run some dados and some rabbets to assemble those into our carcasses that we'll begin with. A few passes through the table saw to run those. I'm going to assemble these frames using some polyurethane glue. I like using that for this kind of application because it's a foaming glue, and with this plywood that'll help foam that glue into the edges, and I think we get a better bond. Makes a stronger unit. And then I will go ahead and also use some screws as well. So we want these to be as strong as we can make them. So I've been doing some work in the shop without you guys, and so I wanted to catch up on what I've done. When we left off, we had these 2 side assemblies together, and what I've done is gone ahead and built the center section off camera that will attach these 2 together, and I'll show you that. So this is the center section that I built, and I started with this frame here that will actually lay down on the bottom. That's the bottom, and this was just a simple tongue and groove frame, just like I built the side assemblies with. And then I went ahead and attached this, made this box. And this is just a 3-sided box that is dadoed and rabbited into the bottom of the frame assembly. These strips here will just go in underneath the drawer sections of this and add a little bit of support for the top of the side assemblies. And then they also attach this frame, and this is the top of the bed. This is the platform part, and this will just add a little bit of support for the mattress. There'll be a piece of plywood that lays over the top of all of it, and then your mattress on top of that. And this box will actually have a drawer in it. I've got some 52-inch slides, I believe, coming, and so it'll have a 52-inch full extension drawer that will slide out. A lot of bedrooms may not have that kind of room, but that will be the option. You can slide that clear out and access that drawer. Give you some more storage for whatever you need there. This section up here is what I'm calling deep storage. You'll be able to pull your mattress down. There'll be a piece of plywood that you can lift up, and then things you don't use very often or whatever, just give you a little more storage up there. And then I also have this frame here that I built, and this will actually be up here. And this is the headboard end, and this is where this will attach the 2 headboard ends of the side assemblies. I'm going to go ahead and get these 3 assemblies clamped back together. I'm just clamping them for right now. We'll go ahead and do that, and we'll get on to our next step of the build. So while I put those together, that center drawer, I ended up using 56-inch drawer slides. I ordered some 52-inch slides that just weren't quite what I needed, so I had to go back and and reorder those, and ended up with some 56-inch slides. And they were super heavy duty and way overkill for what they were for, but they worked great. And so now we're milling down some red oak. We're going to begin making our face frames for those two side pieces. And we'll need a couple of panels. So we're over here at the bandsaw resawing some pieces into thinner stock. And then we'll go ahead and glue those pieces up. And I do like to do a book match on those. So if you don't know what that is, then what you do is you basically take those two pieces and open them up like a book and glue that center edge together. And that can create some really pretty grain patterns. And these corner pieces here will be the corners of the base assemblies. And I need to take a notch out of the corner that will fit onto those carcasses that we previously built. And then we'll go ahead and cut those to length on the miter saw. Now we've got these longer pieces that we're going to cut the rails and the stiles out of. And as you can see, I'm putting those corner pieces, we're going to clamp those on. And that will allow me to measure and cut for these rails. And then we've got those stiles that will go in between those rails as well to separate those drawers. And because of the length of those rails, I had to go to my smaller pocket hole jig. But this works just as great as the big one. And these are the corner pieces on the footboard end of the bed, and I just needed to groove in those. And I'll show you what I use those for in a little bit. And then we're building the panel for the footboard, and I'm going to go ahead and mortise and tenon those rails and stiles on that panel together just for a little bit of extra strength, because it will be a panel that will be broken down to move the bed. And that fits right into that groove that we made into the corner post. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those tenons on those rails. I'm just using the dado stack and the table saw to do that, and they're long tenons, so I needed to just run those through several times. And I use that fence as a stop. And then I need some grooves cut on each end of this rail for the panels, and I needed that to be a stop groove, so I went ahead and did that at the router table with a 1/4 inch groove cutting bit. And then we'll also cut a groove into that corner post. And there's that glue up of the red oak that we did, and we'll go ahead and cut those. Those are our panels. And those panels are 3/8 of an inch thick. And of course we need to cut those down to fit into our 1/4 inch grooves, and so that's what I'm doing here on the table saw. And a better way to do this would probably be to use a rabbiting bit on the router table, but since I don't have a good rabbiting bit at this time, I just elected to do it that way. Okay, so we've been busy around the shop. We've got a lot of pieces in a lot of different places. We've been busy cutting and milling and fitting and doing some things that we need to get done before we start assembly, but I think we've reached that point to where we're going to start gluing some things up, gluing some things to the assemblies, making some of those final permanent connections. So let's hope we got everything done that we needed to do, and we'll go ahead and drill some holes for some threaded inserts. And so I just used a thick block of wood to drill a hole through, and I used the drill press so that I could get that nice and straight. And then I use that to just drill straight into it's just a guide to guide my drill bit into into the plywood there. And then you can see I'm using those T-nuts. So the one end of our side frames, these face frames, will have a panel in it, and that's the headboard end. And the reason I went with a panel on that end is because I figured at some point, or most people will have a bedside table or something that will be up there, and so a drawer would be inaccessible. And so that's why I just went ahead with a panel design up there. And then I'm just using some pocket hole screws to attach those. And normally I wouldn't do that in this instance, but where this is going to be glued and mounted to those carcasses that we built, it'll be plenty strong. And so that's what I'm doing with the biscuit joiner, is cutting some biscuits to help align and attach that to the frames. And as you can see here, I'm making sure I got plenty of glue. And we'll line all those up. That takes a little bit of effort to get all those biscuits lined up. We'll get those lined up and put on there. And then we'll go ahead and just clamp that till the glue dries. And then back to this block that I had to cut for some more threaded inserts. And as you saw before, I used a T-type nut insert. With this one, I'm just going with the threaded inserts here because those T-nuts won't work in this instance. And then just some furniture bolts to attach that, and that was the footboard. Now I'm back with some more of this 8/4 red oak, and we're going to begin making the feet of the bed. And so we'll mill that down through the planer and just get that smooth, and then go ahead and glue that up into some blocks. And I've done that at this point. Now I'm just cutting them into some squares. These feet will be tucked underneath the bed. With the design of the bed, I wanted it to be very friendly with toes. And so to help avoid stubbing toes, we're going to go ahead and tuck those underneath the frames a little bit. And then we'll just use some plywood. We'll attach that to the top of the foot, and then we'll be able to use that to attach that to the frames. And I'll go ahead and use some more of that polyurethane glue to do this, just for some added strength. Some screws to hold that in place while that glue dries. And then you can see that lip with that plywood, that's what we'll use to attach that. So here I'm running a piece of oak through the router, and we're just making a piece of trim for the bottom of the bed. And so I'm going to back that piece of trim up with some more plywood, so you see me nailing that on. And then I went ahead and nailed on that piece of trim. It's just pretty basic, just a square piece, and gave the edges a little bit of round over just to soften those up. And there's the trim all around the bottom. So now I'm back over to the radial arm saw just to break down some more of the plywood. And this is pre-finished plywood. What we're going to start building now is our drawer boxes. And so I just took that back over to the panel set on the table saw to cut those down to size. And then over to the Porter cable router jig to create that dovetail connection. I like this jig because you can do both sides of that joint in one application in one step, so it makes it pretty quick and easy. And we'll just run a dado that we'll install the back part of the drawer into, and then one for the drawer bottom. What I'm doing here is I'm running a groove down the edge of the top of the sides and the back of the drawer. And I'll show you a little later, I'm going to put a piece of red oak on top of that as a piece of trim to cover up the plywood edge. And then what I did there was just round over the bottom corner with a 1/8 inch roundover bit just to soften that edge. I find that does a pretty good job. Those pre-finished plywood kind of get those sharp edges on there, and that just softens them up. And then we'll go ahead and glue that drawer box together. And as always, I just like to make sure that's square. And then we'll assemble it into our carcass. So here's that piece of molding that I'm making for the top of the drawer boxes that we just talked about. And I'm just cutting a rabbet out of each side to make it a T shape. And then you can see the piece on the front of the box there. And then I just go ahead and cut those to length and nail those in. And so on to the drawer fronts, we need to make some more panels. So we're going to resaw some more of this red oak in half to give us a panel for our drawer fronts. We'll just go ahead and glue that up. And while that panel sets in the clamps, we'll go ahead and cut our stiles and rails for the drawer fronts. We'll change out from our regular blade to our dado blade to run some grooves. And as you can see, that groove is offset again. I do that a lot of times just to accommodate for some trim work. And at this point I hadn't decided whether or not we would put trim into these panels, and I decided later on not to do that. And so we're just cutting the tenons on the rails now. And I have to do that in two steps where that groove is offset. I have to cut the narrow side first and cut the thicker side. And same thing with the tenoning jig here. We have to do each side independent of the other just to accommodate that offset. Now we got those panels out of the clamps, and I've gone ahead and sanded those all the way down to 220 before I assemble the drawers. That way they're sanded and you don't have to worry about trying to sand any corners. And then I saved you having to watch me glue those up, and there they are, fit to the case. So here we are. I'm going to glue a piece of red oak to a piece of poplar, and this is going to create a rail along the top of the bed where the mattress will sit. This will be kind of an outside piece that will hold the plywood of the platform and everything in. And of course we want to be able to see the red oak when we put that together, but I didn't want to waste all that will be under the mattress with red oak, and that's why I glued it together with some poplar. And there I have the two sides cut to length there. On the headboard end, we're just going to use a piece of poplar without the red oak on it. And then this is the piece for the footboard end, and we're just going to notch that out to fit up to the ones on the side. I wanted to do that without creating a miter joint because that corner needs to come apart. And so I didn't want any pointy corners or anything to split. And I felt like that was the best way to do that joint there. And some more threaded inserts. We'll make those removable. The one across the footboard will need to be removed in order to move the bed and disassemble it. But the one on the side can stay there. But just for whatever reason, if you wanted to be able to take that off while moving the bed, that's the way I made that. We'll just test fit those to the bed, make sure everything fits nice. So now we're going to go ahead and start building our headboard. So we're back to using some plywood to build our subframe. And then just running a rabbet. I just didn't want to have to put the dado blade in, so I just did that with my regular blade. And some screws to help assemble the corner. So screws and glues will hold that together. So I've got this 8/4 piece of oak that I've resawed through, and my hope was to be able to slice this into 4 pieces so that we could open it up and do kind of a double book match kind of thing. But this is one of those little unfortunate finds as we slice into it. Internal cracking and checking. And unfortunately, the whole rest of my board that was the 8/4 oak was that way, so it's a little bit disappointing. But We went ahead and just kind of switched it up and was able to make a pretty decent looking panel anyways. And so that is what we are doing now, is making some more panels to cover the headboard frame in. And I made most of those panels pretty much with a tongue and groove, like you've seen me do with our other face frames and the drawer fronts. But I also used a couple of mortise and tenon joints on some pieces that I wanted to make sure those joints were nice and strong as well. And so that's just the process of going through. Just fit that tin in there to make sure it's good. That's what we're looking for. And so we'll go ahead and assemble those panels with some glue and clamp those together and let those sit for a little bit to dry. And there they are on the face of the headboard. So I've spent some time in the shop here doing a few things as far as our headboard here. I've got some panels made that you can see I have these temporarily attached here. And then I've also been working on this framework. I've built a couple more panels that will go. This one is for the other side, but it'll go up the side of the headboard like that. But mainly I've been working on this structure here. This will be the opening. This will be what will open up. We'll have our door that will slide down. We've got our panel. And so I've just been getting that in place so that we could start working on our mechanism, getting our actuator and everything mounted in there. So what I'm going to do is probably mount some drawer slides on each side that will attach the panel to the framework, and then it's going to open downward. And so this is all just made out of plywood. I've just kind of boxed that in, and it's kind of been a figure it out as I go process. And so that's why I haven't been filming, because it's just kind of a lot of thinking, a lot of making sure I cover all my bases and everything like that. And so this is the point that we're at now, and we're going to go from there. So this was the point in the build where I kind of realized that things were getting serious. My son lives about 12 hours away, and he was coming for the holidays for Christmas. And so I kind of had a deadline on this build so that he would be able to take that back with him. And I don't normally build with deadlines. That's one thing that I don't like to do, because it kind of puts you in a rush and stuff like that. And I don't like working that way, but I guess for my son, I was willing to do that. And so what I'm working on here is that panel that will open in the headboard. What he wanted was to have a concealed compartment. And so I've installed those drawer slides, and you can see me working to get those attached here, and run into a couple of problems. I had to trim a couple of pieces out and move some clamps down so I could fit them back in. After taking this panel in and out several times, I kind of figured out a much easier way to do it. So there you go. We got those on the drawer slides installed there, and you can see how that panel will move up and down in the headboard. I don't know if you caught that look there, but that's just a quick look of mostly relief with a little bit of satisfaction. This is something I've been putting off for quite a while now, so I decided I'd just get this done. And this is a lip that's going to go around the edge of the platform. I've just taken a piece of 3/4 inch red oak and just beveled that. And that's kind of designed to just kind of hold the mattress from wanting to slide off. So one of the last things we needed to fabricate was the top of the headboard. This can also act as a little bit of a shelf. And there's a test fit there. Now we're on to some finish work, and this was a 2-step finish. I used Rubio monocoat, and this is what they call a pre-color. And I believe this was called Monsoon Gray. And so I went ahead and covered all the pieces with that. And then I went back with their 2C oil with some color in there. I believe this was charcoal, and went over the top of that. And this was the color that my son was requesting, and he was very happy with it. And there's my son there as I show him how to assemble the bed, because I will not be there when he gets to assemble that back at his house. But he was pretty ecstatic with the color, and it came out just about like he liked it. So this was a pretty intense build. A lot was going on. I know we kind of missed a lot of the details in the rush to get things done. But he was able to load this up and take this back to North Dakota with him. Here's a shot of that panel. And we just used an actuator to make that move up and down. And I wired that with a switch on each side of the bed, as you'll see here in just a minute. And hopefully you've enjoyed this build. I certainly enjoyed building this bed. It would have been nice to take a little more time, have another week or two with it. But if you enjoyed watching this and you think I've earned it, if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, that would be great. And again, thanks for watching.